Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic. Is card draw the most important part of any deck? We've talked about lands and we've talked about ramp and rocks, but what role does card draw play in the structure of a deck? Simply, card draw is additional opportunity. Opportunity to see more cards, recoup more resources, and have more everything at our disposal. Card draw generates what we refer to as card advantage. Card advantage is the concept that looking at more cards in your deck can get you closer to having the right cards at the right time and allows you to have access to more resources. A card generates card advantage if it draws you more cards than it costs you. So if you spend one card to draw two cards, you have net one card in hand, and generated one card of card advantage. But you have seen two additional cards, and that is what's important. In this way, card draw is the enemy of variance. We introduce variance into our decks via shuffling and randomization. If we consider our 99 or 98 card commander deck to give us a 1% chance of drawing any card in our deck at any time, then drawing a single card per turn gives us a 1% chance to see a specific card. Card draw gives us a higher chance. Drawing one card per turn is a 1% chance to see the card we want, but drawing 4 cards per turn is a 4% chance. Now that we're talking about math, you know what time it is. Bring out the chalkboard! Working on the knowledge that variance is near infinite, we know that each card we draw is a 1% chance of seeing a specific card. In Commander, we draw our opening 7 cards, then an 8th on our first turn, and a 9th on our second, and a 10th on our third. If we continue to only draw 1 card per turn, we're continuing on a linear course. Our odds of drawing a card we need, like a land or an answer, grows predictably over time. This is where the concepts like land flood or mana screw come in. Despite 30 or 40% of our decks being lands, variance means we could hit all of those cards, or we could hit none of those cards, and only seeing 1 card each turn makes that feel frustrating and feel like your deck doesn't work. That's why players start cutting lands if they're flooded, not because they're running too many lands, but more likely because they're not running enough card draw. Let's look at the same scenario. We draw our opening 7, and an 8th on turn 1, and a 9th on turn 2. However, on turn 2, we now cast a Sign in Blood, losing 2 life and drawing 2 cards. We've now seen our 3rd turn card and our 4th turn card, and we'll see our 5th turn card all by turn 3. If both of those cards were land, I've just ensured that I won't be frustrated drawing them 1 card per turn. If none of those cards were lands, well, I've just increased my chances of seeing a land when I draw my next card. Because a card drawn is a card you can't draw again. So drawing lands reduces the number of lands in your deck and ups your chances of seeing non-lands later. And drawing non-lands now increases your chance of seeing lands later. You've now increased your odds non-linearly. Drawing 1 card per turn forever leaves you with the odds that increase over time, turn over turn. It's slow, but eventually you'll see every card in your deck over the course of 92 turns. Drawing multiple cards per turn, however, increases your odds of seeing specific cards in your deck in a non-linear rate based on the amount of cards you're drawing. More chances to see more cards means less variance. It's just the rate at which you're seeing cards you're changing. And that's why you'll see people saying, 30 lands works for me, Chris, or my CEDH deck doesn't have these issues. Well, that's because those players likely have access to tons of card draw, either as a conscious deck building choice or because their commander draws them cards. I had a player comment on a recent video, "I never need more than 4 lands in my deck," followed immediately by, "My commander is Varina Lich Queen." If your commander lets you see boatloads of cards, of course you're not going to struggle with finding what you need when you need it. There are several kinds of card draw we can have in our decks as commander players. There's repeatable card draw like Phyrexian Arena, or Esper Sentinel, or Guardian Project. This is card draw that gets you multiple cards drawn across multiple turns and is a resource that stays in play to generate card advantage over multiple turns. Then there's one-time card draw like Divination, or Sign in Blood, or Harmonize. These give you one-time supplements of card draw at the cost of a card themselves. So while you may draw 2 cards, it costs you a card, so you net a lower card advantage, but now you have 2 more opportunities to find a card or resource you're looking for. We also have pseudo card draw. This is card draw that doesn't net us card advantage. Impulsive draw, or Red's discard to draw effects, are prime examples of this. Tormenting Voice costs us 2 cards, the spell we cast and a discarded card, to see 2 new cards. We haven't net card advantage, but we've net card opportunity. The opportunity to draw something that can be used to better effect. Red's impulsive card draw is another effect we like to call draw, but be careful. Having only temporary access to an exiled card to be able to cast it until end of turn means we may not ever have access to that card again. These are best used when you already have resources available to cast cards from this temporary card advantage. There is also the concept of card quality to factor in as well. Scrying, for instance, allows us to change the quality of the cards we see with our next draw. While this doesn't get us access to the card, it helps us determine if we want to see the next card or not. Sensei's Divining Top and Miri's Guile function this way too, and Sylvan Library can function as both card quality and card draw for the hefty cost of life. But it should be noted that these card quality effects diminish over time. Looking at the top 3 cards of your library doesn't make a difference if you can't manipulate the top cards of your library by shuffling or drawing those cards or exiling cards from the top of your library. Scrying remains the truest form of card quality because it can do this for you, so keep that in mind if you're building with these effects in mind. With all of this being said, how much is the right amount of card draw to be including in your decks? Like in all things we've discussed for deck building, it depends. I wish I had a magical universal answer for you. You can never ignore card draw. You need to include some amount of it in your deck. But if your commander regularly draws you cards, maybe you can compromise on how much you put in the 99 in favor of having consistent access to it in the command zone. Conversely, if your commander doesn't draw you cards, you need to be concerned with how much you include inside your deck to ensure you don't end up empty-handed or in top deck mode, seeing only a single card each turn with no hopes of additional options. It's those scenarios, no cards in hand and only looking at 1 card each turn, that are signposts that your deck construction has failed you. My tip here is to include a split of one-time card draw and ongoing card draw effects and be mindful of their mana values. If all of your card draw effects are 4 to 5 mana, then you'll need to include more lands in your deck to have a better chance of reaching the ability to cast those effects. If all of your card draw effects are 2 to 3 mana, then you may be able to compromise on your mana base, provided you have enough of these effects to catapult you turns ahead in your probability. However, the most consistent experience will be the one that covers the spread. Enough lands to ensure you're naturally getting where you need to be, with enough card draw to supplement that. Start with 10 pieces of card draw, ideally anything that draws you more than 1 card. Muldrifter, Painful Truths, The Great Henge, temporary or repeatable, high value floor or low value floor, high synergy or low synergy. Then look at the pieces and map where they fall in relation to casting costs. Are you not able to cast them the majority of the time until after turn 4? Then you better be able to naturally hit 4 mana between lands and ramp. That's where our lands, ramp, and draw hit a real nexus. There's no right answer as to how many to run, but I want you to think about the role each plays in your deck. Your lands allow you to cast your spells over time. Your rocks and ramp increase the speed at which you can cast those spells. And your draw ensures you have consistency and volume of spells and resources. These 3 make up the nuts and bolts of your deck. It's tempting to neglect or cut them to make room for bigger, more exciting spells or cards you really want to play, but these are the parts that hold your deck together and make it work. Without these, you aren't playing a deck, you're playing a pile of cards. Now, you may notice that I have not brought up Rhystic Study. For good reason. I do not like the card and I do not think it should be legal in the format of Commander. Per the Commander Rules Committee's philosophy, the criteria of a card being banned in the format includes several boxes that Rhystic Study ticks. It creates a severe resource imbalance. The option to pay the tax on it creates scenarios where even one player at the table not paying the tax for it causes the controller to draw an almost unreasonable amount of cards. The fewer players pay the tax, the further this is skewed. It interacts very poorly with the multiplayer format. Released far before multiplayer was ever a concern, Rhystic Study is fine in one-on-one formats. But with 3 opponents and 3 times the spells being cast, it's clear the card is a leftover from an era where this resource imbalance was not taken into consideration. And it leads to repetitive gameplay. It's a meme at this point. Do you pay the 1? But it also leads to one of the greatest sins in my opinion. It creates repetitive deck building. Many players feel, due to the sheer draw power of Rhystic Study, that it's the only card draw solution you really need in your decks. That's lazy from a deck building standpoint and, unfortunately, is true more often than not. But most importantly, in my opinion, is that it leads to situations where it's difficult to communicate how your deck performs. My deck is a 7 isn't an effective way to communicate what your deck does, but any deck that manages to get and keep a Rhystic Study immediately jumps in power level by several magnitudes. It is a problematic card, and I will not advocate for its inclusion in the majority of decks. With that rant over, how do you approach card draw in your decks? What volume of cards do you typically run, and do you feel like you should be running more? How many of your commanders draw you cards? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks to Moxfield for sponsoring this channel. They are the best deck building platform in the world, and make it easier than ever to plan and plot your decks while building. Do not rely on doing it by eye. Make sure you put thought into your deck construction. Be sure to check out my profile, linked in the description, and follow me while you're there. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button for cool brews and deck building tips. And check out the videos linked here on lands in Commander and the role of mana rocks in deck building. And, as always folks, good luck and have fun.